My girlfriend confessed she had cheated. I needed a real man, she smirked. My friend sided with her. I just smiled, grabbed my keys, and left. This morning, my phone was flooded with 32 missed calls. Looking back, I should have seen the signs. The clues were scattered like breadcrumbs throughout the last few months of our relationship. But when you've been with someone for 3 years, you tend to give them the benefit of the doubt. At least, that's what I kept telling myself. It began with small changes. Allison started working late more often, which wasn't unusual during busy seasons. But then came the unfamiliar perfume. Clothes I'd never seen before showing up in our closet, and her phone became this sacred object, always within arm's reach. I'm not the jealous type, not ever, but something felt off. The way she'd pull away when I tried to hug her while she was texting, or how she'd step out to take calls she claimed were work-related, the constant girls' nights with people I'd never heard of, it all made me uneasy. Last Tuesday, I was folding laundry when her phone lit up on the coffee table. A preview of a message popped up from someone named Jay. Miss you already. Last night was... The rest was cut off, but my stomach dropped. I didn't want to be the guy who snoops through his girlfriend's phone, but it was as if the universe was shouting at me to wake up. When she came home that night, I decided to confront her directly. She was in the kitchen, making herself a smoothie, acting like everything was fine. The blender's hum filled the apartment as I leaned against the doorframe, watching her. "Who's Jay?" I asked. The moment she turned around, her posture shifted instantly. Her shoulders tensed. But then, something unexpected happened. She smiled. Not her usual warm smile, but a cold, almost triumphant one. "Wondering when you'd finally figure it out, Michael," she said, taking a sip from her glass. "Jay's my boss, and yes, I've been sleeping with him for the past 2 months." Her casual tone felt like a slap. No guilt, no shame, just pride. "I needed a real man," she continued, smirking. "Someone who knows what he wants and goes for it. Not someone who spends his weekends playing video games with Jacob and watching stupid movies." I stood there, processing her words. 3 years together, and this was how she really saw me. Amid the shock, something else rose within me. Not anger, but a strange sense of clarity. "Does Chloe know?" I asked, thinking of our mutual friend who had introduced us. "Oh, she's known for weeks," Allison laughed. "Most of our friends do. They get it. Jay can actually offer a future, not just dreams and excuses." That hit harder than the confession of her cheating. These people we'd shared birthdays, holidays, and countless dinners with, they'd all been watching this happen, probably laughing behind my back. I opened my phone and checked my group chat with Jacob and Chloe. "Is this true? You all knew?" Jacob responded almost immediately. "Bro, you're great, but Allison deserves someone more established. Don't take it personally." Chloe chimed in. "We didn't want to hurt you, but maybe this is the wake-up call you need." I looked up from my phone to see Allison watching me, her smirk still there, waiting for the explosion, the drama, the scene she could tell everyone about later. Poor, immature Michael, losing his cool. Instead, I smiled, a real, genuine smile that seemed to catch her off guard. Without saying another word, I walked to our bedroom, grabbed my go bag. I always kept one packed for weekend trips, my laptop and my keys. When I passed through the kitchen again, Allison was staring at me, her smirk faltering. "Where are you going?" she demanded. "Out," I replied simply. "And Allison, keep the apartment. I'm sure Jay can help with the rent." I heard her start to say something as I closed the door behind me, but I didn't stop to listen. My phone started buzzing with messages, probably from our so-called friends trying to explain themselves. As I drove away, I turned off my phone and felt something, relief, freedom, or maybe just the calm that came with knowing I was finally done that I never saw relief coming. Sometimes, losing everything shows you exactly what you never had in the first place. I didn't know where I was heading, but for the first time in months, it felt like I was finally moving in the right direction. Update. First off, Thanks to everyone for the overwhelming support on my last post. I honestly didn't expect it to get so much attention. A lot has happened over the past week, and I'm still processing everything. I've been staying at a modest motel on the edge of town. It's not luxurious, but it's clean, and the owner, Pete, an older guy, seems like a good person. When he heard my story, he knocked $20 off the weekly rate, which was a nice gesture. After 2 days of silence, I decided to turn my phone back on. There were 32 missed calls and 47 text messages. Most were from Allison, some from Jacob and Chloe, and a few from numbers I didn't recognize. But what really grabbed my attention were the notifications from social media. Allison had been busy, really busy. Her Instagram stories painted a picture I recognized all too well. According to her posts, I was a controlling, jealous boyfriend who tracked her every move. She claimed I emotionally manipulated her for years, isolated her from friends, and had an outburst when she finally stood up for herself. Each post was flooded with hundreds of sympathetic comments, including some from people I thought were my friends. The crown jewel was a tearful video where she claimed I financially abused her by splitting our bills 50-50 while I hoarded my money. This was rich, considering she earned more than I did and had insisted on that arrangement herself. Then came a text from Gemma, a coworker I've known for years. "Hey, you might want to check your email. Something's going around the office about you." Sure enough, there was a company-wide email about creating a safe workplace environment with a thinly veiled reference to concerning behaviors from certain employees. No names were mentioned, but the timing was undeniable. I should have been angry. Maybe I should have fought back or posted my side of the story, but instead, I just felt curious. How far was she willing to take this? Pretty far, as it turns out. Yesterday, I stopped by our local coffee shop, the one place I figured would be safe, since Allison hated their coffee. Wrong. The barista, who'd always been friendly, looked at me like I was something stuck to the bottom of her shoe. Later, I found out that Allison had become a regular there, telling anyone who would listen about her survival story. But here's where it gets interesting. While picking up some clothes from storage, I ran into Juliana, Allison's supposed best friend. She looked nervous, glancing around like she was afraid someone would see us talking. "You need to be careful," she whispered. "Jay isn't just her boss. His wife is connected. Like, really connected. And Allison's been telling her you're unstable, even dangerous. Why are you telling me this?" I asked. Juliana's eyes darted around again. "Because this isn't the first time. Before you, there was another guy at work. Allison and Jay did the same thing to him. He ended up leaving town. That conversation changed everything. I spent the night digging through legal records, social media, anything I could find. Turns out, the previous guy existed, Mark something or someone, and he disappeared completely from social media around the time Allison started at the company. This morning, I got a call from our landlord. Allison had tried to remove my name from the lease, claiming I'd abandoned the property. When that didn't work, she told him I'd been threatening her. He called to warn me, mentioning that his sister had gone through something similar years ago. But here's the kicker. While all this was unfolding, I got a message request on Instagram from an account I didn't recognize. The profile picture was of a woman in her 40s, elegant and wearing expensive jewelry. The message was short and to the point. "I believe we need to talk about my husband and your girlfriend. Coffee tomorrow." It was signed Mrs. J. I'm meeting her in an hour. Something tells me Allison's real man story is about to get a lot more complicated. It's funny how watching Allison spin such an intricate web of lies has become oddly freeing. Seeing our friends pick sides based on nothing, but her word only solidifies what I've already realized. I'm not losing anything of value. Update number 2. Apologies for the delay, but these past 2 weeks have been wild. That coffee meeting with Mrs. J? Total game changer. Turns out, she had been gathering evidence for months. Not just about Allison and her husband, but a whole pattern of behavior within the company. Remember how Juliana mentioned the guy who left town? He wasn't the first. Mrs. J had documented at least 3 similar incidents over the last 5 years. Young employees getting involved with her husband, then being pushed out by the couple to keep their secrets hidden. The difference this time? Mrs. J was done playing quietly. She had texts, emails, expense reports, even security footage from the company parking garage. But she was after one last thing: public exposure. That's where the company's annual party came in. I hadn't planned on attending. Why would I? But Mrs. J had other ideas. She told me sometimes the best revenge is letting people reveal their true colors. The party was held at a fancy downtown hotel. I showed up fashionably late, dressed sharper than I ever had for these events. The looks I got when I walked in, priceless. Allison nearly dropped her drink, and Jay's face shifted from red to white so quickly. I thought he might pass out. But here's the beautiful part. I didn't have to do a thing. Chloe approached first, clearly tipsy. "You've got some nerve showing up here." She slurred loudly enough for nearby groups to hear. "After everything you put Allison through." I just smiled. "Everything I put her through? That's interesting. Tell me more." That's when Gemma stepped in. Remember her? Turns out, she'd been quietly collecting her own evidence. Screenshots of Allison bragging about her conquests in company chat groups. Recordings of her planning how to spin the story with Jay. Gemma then announced, "I think we'd all like to hear the real story." The next hour felt like watching dominoes fall in slow motion. Mrs. J timed her entrance perfectly, tablet in hand. The projector accidentally starting up with a slideshow of incriminating texts and photos. Allison's increasingly frantic attempts to maintain control of her narrative played out on the screen. But the real drama came from Jacob, good old brothers before hoes. Except when the hoe could help him climb the career ladder. Jacob had been filming everything on his phone, planning to show it to Jay later to prove his loyalty. Instead, he captured Allison's complete meltdown. "You think you're so clever?" she screamed at me. "You and that bitter old woman trying to ruin everything I built. Jay loves me. We're going to have a life together." That's when Mrs. J dropped the bomb. Divorce papers had already been filed. Turns out, Jay had been feeding Allison the same lies he'd fed the other employees. Same script, different actress. The best part? Through all of this, I barely said a word. I just watched as years of manipulation and deceit unraveled in real time. Juliana, who'd been quiet all evening, finally spoke up. I helped her, she admitted to the now silent room. I helped her destroy that other guy's reputation. I can't do it again. By midnight, the party was essentially over. Allison had stormed out, mascara streaking down her face, and Jay was holed up in his office with HR. As for those friends who had rushed to believe her side of things, they couldn't even look me in the eye. As I was leaving, Mrs. J caught my arm. "Thank you," she said, "for being the one who didn't run." I drove back to my motel room, feeling strangely peaceful. Pete was still up, watching late-night TV in the office. He took one look at my face and grinned. "Good night," he said. I could only smile. This morning, my phone's been blowing up again. But the tone? Very different this time. Apologies, explanations, and people claiming they never truly bought into Allison's stories. I even got a message from Mark, the guy who left town. Apparently, he's been keeping track of everything through mutual connections. Sometimes, karma doesn't need our intervention. It just needs an audience. Final update. Well, here we are. The closing chapter of this saga, and trust me, it's been one hell of a ride. You might want to grab some popcorn for this. First off, the fallout from the company party hit harder than anyone anticipated. Within 48 hours, both Jay and Allison were asked to step down. But that was only the beginning. Remember the documents Mrs. J had gathered? Turns out there was much more, a lot more. Every expense report Jay had doctored to cover up his business dinners with Allison, every email where they schemed against other employees, every performance review manipulated, She handed it all over to the board of directors. The company's legal team moved fast, way faster than I ever expected. They were more concerned about the workplace harassment and financial misconduct than the affairs themselves. Both Jay and Allison are now facing civil lawsuits, but here's where it gets interesting. Remember Mark, the guy who left town? Well, he came back and brought proof, both literal and figurative. Turns out, before he left, Mark had documented everything, including the smear campaign Allison and Jay had orchestrated against him. He just hadn't known what to do with it all until now. Mrs. J introduced him to her lawyer, and 3 days later, Mark filed his own lawsuit. That's when something beautiful happened. Other former employees started coming forward. Each had their own stories, their own evidence. What began as one scandal quickly turned into an avalanche. Allison tried to stay ahead of the storm. She posted a tearful video claiming that she was the real victim, manipulated by Jay, now being persecuted. That's when Juliana finally found her backbone. She posted screenshots of their private chats. Chats where Allison boasted about her conquest and planned how to ruin people's lives. She even mocked her victims. Last week, Allison showed up at my motel. Pete, the owner, called me at work. "The girl you told me about," he said. "She's making a scene in the parking lot. I took my time getting back. I found her sitting on the hood of my car, mascara streaking down her face, clutching a manila envelope. I have dirt on everyone," she said, trying to sound threatening, but her voice was shaky. "If you don't help me stop this, I'll release it all." I just laughed. "Go ahead. Burn every bridge you've got left. See how it works out for you." She threw the envelope at me, filled with photos, screenshots, and private messages, ammunition she collected over years of manipulation. Her insurance policy. I took pictures of each page while she watched, then handed it all back. "Release whatever you want, but first, take a look at where your previous schemes have gotten you." The thing about people like Allison, they can't stand it when their own weapons are turned against them. She tore the envelope to shreds right there in the parking lot, screaming about how we'd all regret this. That tantrum? Someone caught it on video, and it was all over social media within hours. The final blow came yesterday. Mrs. J's divorce was finalized, and guess what? She got everything: the house, the cars, most of their assets. Jay's golden parachute from the company? Gone to cover his legal fees. His reputation? Destroyed. His future career prospects? Let's just say, Google isn't a fan of his anymore. As for Allison, last I heard, she's moving back in with her parents, somewhere out of state. Her social media has gone dark, and the friends who sided with her, they're dealing with their own fallout. Turns out, backing the wrong horse has its consequences. Jacob tried to apologize yesterday, sending me this long message about how he should have been a better friend. I just replied with a screenshot of his old messages supporting Allison. He blocked me. Coward. Chloe's doing damage control, too. She's worried those screenshots Allison kept might affect her own career. I almost feel bad, almost. As for me, I just signed a lease on a new apartment, got a promotion at work. Funny how removing toxic people can change everything. And yes, I'm seeing someone new, taking it slow, doing it right. The best revenge isn't about plotting or scheming. It's about living well and letting people destroy themselves. But I won't lie, watching it all burn has been incredibly satisfying. This will be my last update. Thanks for riding along with me. Reddit, remember, karma doesn't need our help. Sometimes, you just need to step back and let people reveal their true colors.